how to properly design an IUL insurance policy. In this episode, I'm going to talk about a situation, a phenomenon, some financial advisors call it that, where you can maximum fund an insurance policy and take the least amount of insurance you can get away with under IRS rules, and it turns into a tax-free cash cow. And many financial advisors do not understand what I'm going to teach you in this episode. So get ready. I'm going to enlighten you on how to properly design an IUL to be used as a living benefit more than the death benefit. I'm Doug Andrew, and I've been doing this for 5 decades, helping people prepare for long-term goals such as retirement, maybe saving money towards college funding for their kids or grandkids, maybe using money as working capital for their business or for real estate management, emergency funds, maximizing their pension if they're a school teacher, police officer, or firefighter, sometimes getting money out of IRAs and 401ks into a properly designed IUL, which will knock the socks off of leaving it in an IRA or 401k invested in the market. Once people come to a realization, wow, this is like the dream solution for many long-term financial goals. Now, I would define long-term as any financial goal 5 years or longer down the road, okay? So once you want to look at doing this, it's imperative that you go to a licensed individual, and I would recommend a certified IUL specialist that understands how to do it correctly. Unfortunately, I have discovered that probably 99.9% of IUL policies sold in America are not designed correctly to do what I'm going to show you here, to be used primarily for living benefits. So let's go through this and give you some epiphanies, some aha moments as I explain the history behind these and how you design one correctly. Now, I have taught this for now 5 decades. Universal Life started in 1980. So let's go to when I began. I started actually in 1974, and I had a Series 1 securities license and also an insurance license back then. And I was a big buy term insurance, invest the difference into mutual fund type of proponent. And that's because when people actually bought term insurance and actually invested the difference with a pretty good chunk of their money, and the product that I was using back in 1974 sort of forced them to do that. See, whole life forces you to overpay for the insurance, especially during the early years, and it builds up that cash value. But I knew that if my clients were disciplined, that I could have them have at least 2/3 of their dollars go into a mutual fund or mutual funds of their choice. And by diversifying and using dollar cost averaging, if they could earn, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12%, they could far outperform whole life insurance. The key is making sure they could earn that rate of return. Now, Dalbar says that over any 20-year period since the Great Depression, if you buy and hold stocks or mutual fund shares, you'll probably average about 9.14% before tax. You'll net 6. That outperformed whole life with their average dividend rates and so forth. Now, what we were trying to do is earn 12%, but even if you earn 12%, if you have to pay tax on that at the end of the day, you earn 12, and in a 33% tax bracket, which most of my clients were in, 12% isn't all your money. If you had $1 million nest egg earning 12%, theoretically, you ought to be able to pull out $120,000 a year without depleting the nest egg, okay? But you pull out $120,000, you pay $40,000 in taxes between federal and state taxes. 41 out of 50 states has a state income tax. You're only netting $80,000 to buy gas and groceries, and many asset managers charge another 1% on that $1 million they're managing. So you're only netting 7. You're earning 12, but you're only netting 7. See, the reason why E.F. Hutton, who's the brainchild behind the emergence of Universal Life, came out with it, they said, hey, we could just earn 11 and net 10, because back in 1980, when Universal Life was introduced, interest rates were high. And so from 1980 clear into the 1990s, I never got credited less than 11.75% on my Universal Life, and as high as 15.5%. let's just use 11. I'll use even less than the 11 3/4. But I could earn 11 and net 10, meaning the 1% difference was not tax. It was the cost of the insurance that the IRS said had to be there in order for it to be tax-free. And then when interest rates started to come down in the 1990s, indexed universal life was introduced so that you could still earn rates of return of 11 and netting 10, which I have done ever since 1980. I've averaged 11.17, and I've netted over 10% cash-on-cash rate of return on my indexed universal life by rebalancing and by diversifying, okay? Indexing allowed that to continue to happen even when interest rates came down to the 4 and 5% range on the investments that a lot of insurance companies have their money into. Okay. So what happened is when E.F. Hutton came out with it in 1980, I had over 3,000 clients in 13 Western states that had money in the market in mutual funds. So they were never happier than when I got their money out of the market because of that volatility, okay? Now, in a nutshell, what E.F. Hutton realized that for now it's been over 110 years in the Internal Revenue Code, money inside of a permanent life insurance policy, a cash value policy, accumulates tax-free under Section 72E of the Internal Revenue Code because people who would do this were taking pressure off of the government to provide for them if they died and they left behind a widow and orphans, that they weren't going to be dependent on the government and welfare. So it was actually helping the government. It was saving them money. And so they said, we're going to let these be tax-free. Well, when E.F. Hutton said, why don't we use it primarily for living benefits, not just the death benefit? Let's have people take ownership and put money into these to use it for tax-free income. That's also taking pressure off of the government to have to provide for people who did not save for their retirement. And so they're rewarding those that do because they don't have to rely on welfare or charity or their children for support. And so under the 3 sections of the code that have been around in one form or another now for over a century, money accumulates tax-free under Section 72E. Whether it's interest or dividends or whatever, money inside of an insurance policy, a permanent insurance policy, is tax-free as it grows. Section 7702 talks about how you can access money while you're alive. You don't have to die to get the money tax-free. When you die, it's tax-free under Section 101A. Life insurance is always income tax-free. That's Section 101A. Section 7702 dictates how you can access the money that's in there while you're alive and use it for tax-free income. So that if you're doing what E.F. Hutton came up with, the idea that you could accumulate money and you could put in, $500 a month for 30 years and end up with $1 million, or you could sock away $100,000 a year for 5 years. That's a total of $500,000. Many of my clients have done that clear back in the 1980s. And when they put in $500,000, it doubled in 7.5 years to $1 million. In another 7.5 years, it was worth $2 million. It doubled again. Then it doubled again to $4 million, doubled again to $8 million. So in the 30th year, they had $8 million tax-free. And they started out with $500,000. They didn't add any more money. It just grew, okay? Because they were earning an average return of at least 9.6%. 9.6 into the rule of 72, your money's going to double every 7.5 years. And they were netting at least 9.6. And so that's Section 7702. This is what happens when you die. Whatever you leave behind blossoms, increases in value, and transfers tax-free. Nothing else does this in the Internal Revenue Code. I've taught advanced continuing education to CPAs and tax attorneys now for years, and I've always challenged them, show me any other financial instrument that does that. And they've yet to show me any. Now, if you've watched very many of my educational videos, when this was first introduced in 1980, the IRS went to E.F. Hutton and said, we think you're overstepping the bounds of tax-free accumulation inside of life insurance under these sections of the code. You're trying to use it for living benefits, and why are your clients putting in, this much money into a dinky little life insurance policy? And they said, because they're using it for living benefits. They took them to court. E.F. Hutton won. They weren't doing anything wrong. But then the IRS went to Congress and they convinced them to redefine it or change some tax definitions. So these are called TEFRA, DEFRA, and TAMRA. These are acronyms. TEFRA is the Tax Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982. And they didn't know quite what they were doing, so they had to redefine it again 2 years later, 1984, under the Deficit Reduction Act. Basically, the TEFRA, DEFRA tax citations have to do with that this is an insurance policy that is tax-free, and what you're doing is you are putting in a lot of money into it, and as you put the money in, then the death benefit that's at risk to the insurance company is going down because your cash is growing inside of it. The insurance is actually getting cheaper as you're getting older. It's called you're self-insuring, and I'll explain this graphically here in just a moment. A lot of agents don't understand this. And so TEFRA and DEFRA would dictate at the beginning of the account the minimum amount of life insurance death benefit that would be required based upon the amount of money that person wanted to reposition over, one payment or 5 payments or 30 years worth of payments. And so you have to calculate how much money do you want to be grandfathered to put in there. And so TEFRA and DEFRA calculates what the amount of money would be during the first 11 years, even if you don't take 11 years to get it in there. Don't worry about 11 years, but the point is this. The amount of insurance is dictated based upon the person's age, gender, and health. But TEFRA and DEFRA gives it parity. And a lot of agents don't understand this. Parity means equality, which means if you're setting up an IUL to perform, to grow tax-free at the best net internal rate of return, so at the end of the day, if you averaged 11, you'll net 10. If you earn 9, you net 8 or whatever. You want the insurance to become cheaper as you get older. Then TEFRA and DEFRA says the older you are when you start it, the less you are required to have less insurance than if you were younger. What does that mean? Okay, it means that if you wanted to reposition $500,000 in one fell swoop or over 5 years or over 30 years, and you were a 22-year-old female, the amount of insurance under TEFRA and DEFRA required might be $5 or $6 million. If you're a 60-year-old and you wanted to put in $500,000, the amount of insurance is only $1 million. You get away with less insurance. If you're like a friend of my family who came to us in 1980, he was 78, but he had a life expectancy of an 83-year-old because he had 3 blocked arteries, adult onset diabetes, prostate cancer episode, 6 sisters predeceased him, and 3 brothers. And so he was rated table D. Okay, he had to pay twice as much for the insurance. So he wanted to reposition $500,000, which he did, and we just squeezed down the death benefit down to about $700,000. He wasn't interested in $700,000 of insurance. He was interested in his $500,000 generating $50,000 a year of tax-free income, a 10% payout tax-free, which he realized right off the bat. And so he got the same rate of return. He earned 11 and net 10, even though he was technically like an 83-year-old, because he got away with less insurance than the 20-year-old had to have in order to accommodate $500,000. Now, there's a lot of agents that don't understand that, and so the actual insurance required is less, and it gets cheaper as you get older when you maximum fund it, okay? And so that comes under TEFRA and DEFRA. TAMRA basically dictates how fast you can put it in there. So TAMRA was not passed until 1988. So let me explain this with a metaphor of a bucket. When you design an IUL, it's like a bucket, and you're trying to design it to accommodate the amount of money you want to put into there. So let's keep it simple. It could be $500 a month that a 35-year-old wants to put in for 30 years, okay? Or like I work with people that are maybe 60 years old and they want to get in $500,000 as soon as possible. And they want to fill it up as soon as TEFRA, DEFRA, and TAMRA allow. So we're wanting them to become self-insured. So watch how this works. If I have a 60-year-old male and he's in decent health, and he wants to reposition $500,000 as fast as he can't put it in all at once in order to have it be tax-free when he goes to access money. Because if he did put it in all at once, he violates TAMRA and would create a MEC, a modified endowment contract. And so he wants it for living tax-free income. He wants to be able to, pull out, let's say, $50,000 a year tax-free, a 10% payout. Now, the minimum death benefit under TEFRA and DEFRA for a 60-year-old now is only about $1 million. My heavens, he could buy way more life insurance than that. That's not his objective. He wants the least amount of insurance. So you design it to accommodate the $500,000 by taking the least amount. There's a lot of agents that put way more life insurance on an IUL than is required if the person wants to have it grow tax-free at the best net internal rate of return, okay? And so now, if he starts to fund it, he could only maybe put in $100,000 to $125,000 a year. But if we get real technical, let's say it's $100,000, he could put in $100,000 the first day of the first year. He could put in another $100,000 the first day of the second year. That's 1 year and 1 day. He can put in the second $100,000. Now he's got $200,000 in there, $300,000, $400,000. In 4 years and 1 day, he's got his $500,000 in there. Now let's take a snapshot in time right now. He's got $500,000 in there, and it took 4 years and 1 day, the fastest to do it, let's say. Now, if you structure this primarily for living benefits, you use the level death benefit, okay? That means that anytime when he had cash in there, if he happened to die, even though that's not the primary reason he used this, but if he happened to die, all of the cash that's in there and the interest on that's tax-free is part of the $1 million death benefit. If he dies, he just leaves behind $1 million. And some people go, well, why don't you have his cash be added on top of the death benefit? Well, then the spigot on the bucket, which is the cost of the insurance, is going to keep getting more expensive as you get older because he's going to have to keep paying for $1 million of life insurance. That's not the objective. So when you use the level death benefit, the $500,000 now is part of the $1 million. I'm just super simplifying here. So that means the net amount at risk, the insurance company pays out the same $1 million, but $500,000 of it's your own money. So they only were on the hook for the remaining $500,000. They're only charging you for that remaining $500,000 at risk. Is this making sense? So even though you're 4 years older, the insurance now is costing half as much as it did because half of it's your money. Now, as that $500,000 in 7.5 years at 9.6% return doubles to $1 million, now your cash equals the death benefit. Many of my clients, by the 11th year, their cash inside of their IUL has grown to equal and exceed the death benefit. Now, if they die, they leave behind $1 million. They had $1 million in there. They're self-insured. It's tax-free because they took ownership of the policy. There is no cost of insurance, okay? This is like buying term and investing, the difference on steroids. You're self-insured within 11 or 12 years. Well, technically speaking, under TEFRA and DEFRA, if this person dies when their cash value equals the death benefit, if they die, then the insurance company pays out 5% more, okay? $1,050,000. But the insurance company is only charging you down here on the spigot, only charging you for $50,000 of coverage. The interest you're earning on $1 million in there is way more than the cost of $50,000 of death benefit. Let's go another 7.5 years. The $1 million doubles to $2 million in another 7.5 years. Now, if you die, the insurance company pays out $2.1 million. But they're only charging you for $100,000, not $2.1 million, because $2 million of the $2.1 million is your own money. The insurance gets cheaper as you get older, which means this. If in the 20th year, you were to earn 11%, you might net 10.9 in that year. But retroactive back to year one, if you earn 11, you'll probably net around 10 because we have to go through these TAMRA hoops. It takes 5 years to get the money in there. So you have to be patient. This is the long-term strategy. So to understand TAMRA in my book, which I want you to stay with me to the end, and I'll gift you a copy of my 300-page book, The Laser Fund, we compare it to a 5-story office building. Let's say the IRS said, well, listen, if you build a 5-story building and you want to rent that out, listen, if you just rent out the first floor the first year, just 20% of the building the first year, and leave the rest vacant, and you go, why would I do that? Well, the first day of the second year, you can fill it up another floor, and then another floor. And in the fourth year, but 4 years and 1 day into it now, it's full. And if you'll do that, if you'll spread out filling up the building to 4 years and 1 day in this example, all of your rental income you get from that building forever, ever after is tax-free. If you do the math, it would be worth doing it that way. That is a max-funded IUL. When you fund it properly and you do it the way the IRS says, it turns into a tax-free cash cow. And nothing else comes close to it when it is designed properly. So the key is you take the least amount of insurance you can get away with and put in the most money the IRS allows. There's a lot of agents that do not understand how to do that right. And then you fund it correctly, because what normally happens is an IUL agent will talk to somebody and they'll say, well, we want to start socking away $500 a month. But we have a lump sum of $20,000 up front we want to drop in. Can we do that? Yes. But then what they do is instead of calculating the least amount of insurance to accommodate that, they go, oh, we're going to have to accommodate $20,000 in a lump sum. And so Tamara says, oh, they have to have this much more insurance. And they end up putting way more insurance than is required just to accommodate that upfront extra $20,000. That $20,000 ought to be divided by 5. You should only put in $4,000 of that $20,000 a year for the first 5 years, and then you calculate the minimum death benefit. It makes all the difference in the world. What's the difference? When you do it correctly, you can earn 11 and net 10. If you do it incorrectly and you take more insurance than is required, then if you earn 11, you might only net 7. Would you rather earn 11 and net 10 cash on cash so that every million can generate $100,000 a year of income down the road? Or do you want to earn 11 and only net 7 to where you can only get $70,000 a year of income? You're giving up a huge amount of growth and income when it's not designed properly. So this is critical. I've gone through it quick. If you want to learn more, this book has been flying off of our warehouse shelves. The Laser Fund is in its 9th printing. And it retails for $20 on Amazon or more. If you buy it on Amazon, thank you, but I'll gift you a copy free. It's 300 pages, actually 2 books in one. This side is about 200 pages with 14 chapters, all kinds of charts and graphs and explanations for the left brain learner. If you're more of a right brain learner, you learn more by stories and examples, you just flip it over to this one. And this book, about 100 pages, 12 chapters with 62 chicken soup for the financial soul stories. So left brain, right brain. If you want to use your whole brain, read the whole book. You simply go to laserfund.com, click on the link below, and you contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling. I'll cover the rest of that. I'll pay for the book. I will fire out a hard copy to you via priority mail. But while you're in there claiming your free copy, if you like to listen and learn or watch and learn, there's audio and video formats available. There's even an 18-hour masterclass that you can dive very deep. And we have many, many people who are serious about their finances that do that. This is why we have many multi-millionaires and billionaires who design IUL. They read my book 3 and 4 times. And the affluent do this in order to have liquidity, safety, and earn predictable rates of return. And while you're in there, we have educational webinars. They're free. We teach them on a regular basis. But you can even schedule an appointment to talk to a certified IUL specialist that can help you know how to do it correctly so that you don't have to worry about, does this agent know what they're doing? We can point you to agents who know what they're doing because they become certified. So this is to you and your brighter future.